Hello, bienvenidas. Good morning, everyone. My name is Niharika Acharya. I'm Executive Director of Events at The Hill, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to our third annual Latina Leaders Summit. Year after year, we are so humbled and thrilled to see your excitement for the conversations that take place on this stage. So let's get started. I'd like to begin by thanking our presenting sponsor, Bank of America, for their continued support of our program. Also, a big thank you to our supporting sponsor, AT&T. Our summit this morning could not be more timely. At a moment when divisive rhetoric is dominating the political discourse in Washington, we look forward to convening a thoughtful forum on leadership and efforts to have our institutions reflect the diversity of the American people. Last year's midterm elections saw historic wins for Latinas across all levels of government, prompting some to call 2018 the year of the Latina. Although many strides have been made, Latinas still remain one of the most underrepresented demographics, both in government and the private sector. So this morning, we'll hear from a bipartisan lineup of Latina members of Congress and inspiring and accomplished Latinas from all walks of life. First, a few housekeeping notes. In addition to our audience here at the Conrad, we are also live streaming on thehill.com. Please keep your phones on silent throughout the duration of the program, but we do want you to engage in the conversation on social media. So you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at The Hill Events, and join the conversation this morning using the hashtag #TheHillLatina. We're going to be taking questions during the program and are eager for your participation, so please be on the lookout for members of our team with handheld mics. Finally, you will receive an electronic survey following the conclusion of this program. We are always eager to hear how we can make our events more dynamic, so please take a few moments to provide your feedback on today's program. With that, let's dive right in. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Congresswoman Nanette Barragan. Congresswoman Barragan was elected to the House in 2016, becoming the first Latina to represent California's 44th Congressional District. She currently serves as the second vice chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and is only the second Latina ever to be appointed to the Energy and Commerce Committee. Joining the Congresswoman on stage is Lulu Garcia Navarro, host of the Sunday Weekend Edition on NPR. Lulu, it's an honor to have you back again to moderate our conversations this year, and the stage is yours.
My pleasure. Welcome, everybody. This is my favorite kind of event to host because we get to talk to some of the people making decisions here in Washington about their experiences as Latinas and also as policymakers. And so I'm going to start just by having a general conversation, and then we're going to have 5 minutes for each guest. I'll be up on the stage for 3 guests. We'll open it up to you. So I want to start just by maybe introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your journey to office.
So I grew up the youngest of 11 kids. I like to say I was the last accident. My dad was 59 when I was born, which is why I say that. And so I grew up in a pretty big Latino household. We were all crammed into one room. I felt like there was one family in one room, another family in another room. And you know, our parents came to make a better life for their kids. Very much the story you hear across the country. And we were poor. And I remember my parents saying, doctor or lawyer. That's the only way you're going to get out of the world of poverty. Now, I see blood and I want to pass out. So for me, it was a matter of, okay, I'm going to go to law school. And we never really talked about how we would pay for it or how I would get there. It was more just of a very general conversation. But there was a lot of struggles when you come from a household like mine, constantly, as I remember, getting the brown paper bag full of yellow cheese and the assistance that we got, which is, food benefits, going to school and people teasing you who don't look like you, saying things like, where are you from, where's your accent, go back to where you come from, right? Things that very much we're hearing about a lot now, happening across the country, but I was one of the lucky ones. My 2 older sisters dropped out of high school, got pregnant very young, And for me, I was able to finish high school. I went to UCLA undergraduate. When I was at UCLA, I walked into the Career Center one day and I said, I'm studying political science. I see Washington on television every day. Maybe I could visit one day. And it was a counselor there who said, you can do anything you want. You can work at the White House, you could work at the Supreme Court. And I said, how would I ever get a job there? My parents were immigrants. They have no political ties or connections. We don't donate any money to politics. And the counselor said, just apply. And next thing you know, I was an intern in the Clinton White House. And I saw people that looked just like us, who had stories like mine, and that motivated me and said, if I go home and I work hard and I study, maybe I too can come back and serve another president.
What was it that made the difference for you? Because that kind of story, as you know, with your own family, could have ended up quite differently. Absolutely.
Part of it, I think, is the decisions we choose, very lucky breaks, people that help us along the way. You don't get here on your own. It's people who look out for you, who give you good advice, and it's taking risks. When I was a lawyer, I ended up going to law school, becoming an attorney. I came out with a ton of debt, and I went to a big law firm, something I had not planned on doing. But it was there, partners who would help guide me and give me advice. And I thought my time was over to run for anything. So I volunteered on a presidential campaign in 2012. I moved to Florida for 6 weeks to do voter protection work. And when I got home is when I said, what can I do locally? What can I do to give back? And I saw a city council meeting and it was all men, nobody of color. And I Googled them and I said, I could do that. They're not that impressive. So I ran for city council. It had been 10 years since a woman was on the council. And this was in Hermosa Beach. There had never been a Latina before. There's only 5% Latinos in Hermosa Beach, 86% white. And people said, you can't win here. There are no Latinos here. And I said, I'm running on the issues. We'll see what happens. And I got elected. I was the first Latina ever. I was the first Latina mayor there. And I was there for 2 years before Linda Sanchez called me, who I did not know. And she said, hey, I heard about you. You should run for Congress. And my initial response was like, oh no, I'm happy where I am. Where would I ever raise $1 million? Because that's generally what they tell you to run for Congress. And she said, we're gonna help you, and it was very encouraging. Had she not made that call, I would have never considered running for that seat. And so there are people in your life who make suggestions. Now, it was a big risk. I had to move out of my home. I had to resign my seat on the city council that I worked very hard for. I had to quit my job. I'm single, so I had to go into financial debt because I had no income to pay for my mortgage or pay for my rent. But it was worth it. I said, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it right. I'm gonna go in 110%, and if it happens, it happens. If not, I could say that I tried hard and I won.
How do you navigate your identity at a moment like this, as a Latina woman in Congress, having to interact in communities where they're overwhelmingly white at a time when there's a lot of discussion about identity and about different groups and how they're perceived? How do you move and talk about the issues?
I think there's a greater responsibility because of the conversation happening on the national level right now. In 2016, when I was elected, I was the only new Democratic Latina elected to the US House in the entire country. Now that's pretty remarkable, how in this last cycle, we have changed those numbers. But first of all, I take a lot of pride in my heritage and being Latina, and I use that, especially now, wherever I am, whether I'm on television or not. And it's talking about my family's experience, my personal experience, and bringing that perspective, which is critically important, especially now at a time where women are under attack, where immigrants are under attack. It feels like everybody is. And so to bring my experience and, frankly, our people are under attack. And so for me, I take a lot of pride, and it's a lot of responsibility to be that voice to fight back against some of the things that are occurring, whether it's on the southern border whether it's happening here in the interior.
Well, you were just on the southern border.
I spend a lot of time there right now.
Along with other members of Congress.
Yeah.
I just want you to, there's other things to talk about, but I do want you to talk briefly about your experience there and why you felt it was important to go.
So I sit on the Committee for Homeland Security, and in the last term I was on the border subcommittee. And when we started to see and hear the stories of what was happening, of the conditions down there, of people being turned away at the port of entry, I wanted to see it for myself. I'm a visual learner. I could read about something, but I'm a much better advocate when I go and experience it for myself. And I remember seeing the photo of Maria, who was tear gassed at the border in Tijuana. And I have an aunt that lives in Tijuana, and I actually take my mom down there quite a bit. So I said, I want to go check it out. I happened to get a call from one of the immigrant rights groups that said, hey, would you come and witness Maria as she presents herself at a port of entry so you could see what's happening and you could talk about it. And I said, okay. So I went down there, and I was expecting to be there for 3 to 4 hours. Well, we had a camp overnight there. So we were basically there for some 12, 15 hours. And we slept outside on the concrete in the cold and experienced firsthand what people are going through who are coming to the ports of entry where they're told to go to apply for asylum, which is legal, and they're being turned away. What I saw was pretty remarkable. We had agents who were convincing people that if they got up and they went to another port of entry, they were going to be taken care of, which was not true. What was going to happen was there was a Mexican official waiting for them across the line, so that as soon as they crossed over into Mexican territory again, they were going to be taken away. And it was pretty egregious to see what I saw, what my colleagues saw, and to experience it. And I said, if this is how they treat a member of Congress, can you imagine how they treat migrants when nobody's around and nobody's watching? And even the agent there was talking about me, was talking about migrants, how we're terrible people in front of us. And so this is where my experiences down there have really shaped on my thoughts and what I believe is a cultural systemic problem within the agencies.
Sitting in the Committee for Homeland Security, I mean, that gives you a voice, a much louder voice than others may have. How do you then bridge this divide? We're in an incredibly partisan moment where things are being seen very, very differently. The very definitions of words that we all thought we understood are being litigated. Is there a space to communicate across the aisle? Because poll after poll shows that the American people want Congress to work and want results.
So I think what makes it challenging is when you have the president at the top being the divisive person. It's not trying to bring people together, the language that's being used. When you talk to my Republican colleagues across the aisle privately, you hear something different than you hear in public. I'll give you an example. I was just at the border last weekend. For the first time ever, I ran into a situation where I was talking to a mother, and the mother tells me that her daughter is an American citizen who happens to be right there with her in this detention facility. Look, it's behind one of these fence cages, okay?
And you publicized this. You showed the picture of the passport and...
Correct. I immediately said, what? Because she's like, my daughter's an American citizen. And I said, well, where was she born? And she says, Queens, New York. And I said, well, can you prove it? And she's like, well, I have her passport. And she pulls out the passport. And the agent who's with me says, we got to keep going. You got to move. Because by now, the rest of my colleagues were on to something else. I said, no, there's an American citizen here. I have to take a picture. And I pulled out my phone. I took a picture of her passport, the inside and the outside, and immediately started to advocate. But, you know, this is what's happening. And so we got to make sure that we are having that oversight. We're highlighting these issues. But apparently, this is happening more and more. And so this is where I think my role is really critically important. And I know I digress, because there was a point I was going to make to that. But it's just astonishing. And then you read in the New York Times just yesterday about the US citizen that was held for 3 weeks and wasn't even coming through the border. He was going through a checkpoint, so he was in an interior. And so it is, it's very scary. My own mother asked me whether she had to start carrying her passport when this all started a couple years ago.
What did you tell her?
I said, no, Mom, absolutely not. You don't have to carry your passport. Carry my phone number. That's what I told her. I was trying to calm her down.
Friends in high places.
Although now I might say something different.
Latino poverty is at an all-time low. Home ownership is up. And we're coming into an election in 2020 where I Googled, as you do as a very deep investigative reporter before coming to something like this, and there was a headline that I thought was really interesting, which is Latino vote could swing the Democratic primary, and Latinos will have the largest minority voting group, will be the largest minority voting group now in 2020. There's been a huge expectation that the Latinos' time will come to really make an impact in voting, and it seems like 2020 might be that time. So first of all, I want to ask you, have you chosen a candidate for primary, for the Democratic primary? Is there anyone that you are backing at this point?
I actually endorsed very early, before she even announced, Senator Kamala Harris, who's my senator. We've worked together closely. I've seen what she's been able to do in committee. She's kind of been at the front lines of opposing this administration. She's smart, and I think she's the progressive we need right now.
Do you think, at this particular point in time, Latinos who are, as you note, feeling under threat, but are also benefiting from this economy? We're seeing the Trump administration making a play, Latinos for Trump. We do see consistently that at least 30% of Latinos vote Republican. Do you think that there are inroads that both parties can make with this group that has been neglected, that hasn't really been spoken to?
There's no doubt. One of the concerns I have always had and experienced is that Latinos don't vote as often in primaries like they vote in generals. I think part of this is an education concern where people just don't understand why it's important for them to vote in primaries. In my own race, I would knock on doors in Southgate, which is the most Latino part of my district, and people would say, yeah, I'm with you, I'll see you at the polls in November. And I said, no, wait, there's a primary. You first have to vote, and back then it was in June, so that you can determine who's gonna be the candidates. And they would say, oh, like they didn't really understand that. My own mother was the same way. She was like, why don't we just vote to see who gets the final, spot? And so I think there's a lot of education that needs to go around there. But look, we hold quite a bit of power if we use our vote and we come out and vote. Latinos still are not voting at the numbers that we should be voting at. I think part of that is education. There's changing systems. I'll give you an example. In Los Angeles, I'm really worried about this. They are getting rid of local polling locations. So, for example, Latinos love to vote at the polls. There's something about walking in and voting. They don't like to vote by absentee ballot as much. And I think that really hurts us because people get sick the day of, people can't go, they can't get time off work, you name it. But now what's gonna happen is you're gonna have La Abuelita walking down the street to the little school where she's used to voting all the time, and it's gonna be closed. Or the little school down the street in her neighborhood, and it's gonna be closed in LA County because they're gonna have voting centers. And my concern is they're gonna show up, it's gonna be closed, and they're gonna say, I'm not driving all the way to a voting center.
We're going to open it up. I'm being kept on a very strict schedule. There's a clock right here. So if anyone has any questions.
Hi, my name is Crystal Martinez. I'm with the University of California system.
Woohoo. UCLA graduate here.
As second vice chair to the CHC, I wanted to know if the CHC has been vocal about their priorities for HEA reauthorization. As we know, Latinos continue to be a rising group going on to secondary education. And so federal dollars prop that up through Pell Grants and student loans, and we wanted to know where the CHC is on that.
Absolutely. The CHC, we have a lot of issues that we actually put out our priorities on, and that's certainly one of them. Being in the majority now, I think, has made it easier for us to move some of the bills on higher ed. But there are still greater challenges, and I think, you know, IDEA funding is one, for example, that I personally have been pushing, and I think has a huge impact on Latinos. IDEA is funding for children in schools who may need a little extra help. They used to call them special needs. And for example, LA County has a huge number of students, especially in the Latino community, who might need that extra push. So we have done things like that, supporting federal grants, Pell grants, which are huge. But it's student loan debt, I think, is probably the biggest one in that, that we have been very supportive of.
Hi, Congresswoman. I'm Ana Paula Velasco. I go to school here in DC. I'm interning over the summer. You mentioned how there are many Latinos who vote Republican. I come from a family where I'm a little more progressive than my little brother is and my dad is. My friends say that sometimes they'll pay $10 to see our dinner table discussions just because it can get so heated. My question to you is, you know, we talk about these divides that are happening in our Congress and our world. Sometimes they happen within our Latino community. So what would you say your advice would be on how to handle these divides and how we can be unidos instead of dividing, especially in this time?
You know, I think for me, one of the things I do in Congress, which I think works as well at home, is try to find the common ground, right? And work together on the areas where you have common ground.
You're from a Latin family, you know that doesn't work. No, I'm kidding.
Well,
I mean, come on.
That's an interesting point. It's starting there, I think, which makes it easier. It's when you start, you know, going into the areas where you disagree, or it makes it more challenging. When I was at the border this weekend, there was a lot of conversation with Congressman Walker, who's on Homeland, who's a Republican, about what do we do with the border. And, you know, there was a whole conversation about whether you expand the family definition, because right now it's just a parent and a child, that's what's considered family. If you're with a sibling, it's not considered a family. And so we had this whole debate about, you know, us separating, well, that the government is separating siblings, we're separating grandparents from kids, and, you know, aunts and uncles. And what was really fascinating was I found a Border Patrol agent who said to me, oh, well, it should be a bipartisan issue across Congress to expand the definition of family. We don't want to separate families, whether it's a grandparent. And I said, wait, hold on a second. Hey, Walker, come over here for a moment. And I called him over and I said, you need to hear this. And the border agent was a Republican. I said, here's a Republican, listen to what he has to say. So in that case, for me, I found somebody unexpectedly who agreed with me, and then I brought in, you know, the member who was of the same party to talk to him to see if maybe that would persuade him. And they had an exchange about DNA testing and so on and so forth. But at the end, the member walked away and he kind of nodded. And when I talked to him about how do we get the person who was a US citizen out of custody, I even said to him, I started with, what do you think we should do? Right? Because I didn't want it to dismiss what I think we should do. So I started with, well, what do you think we should do? And the response was something along the lines of, well, we shouldn't be holding American citizens. And that's when I made a proposal. Well, what if we do this? What if we let the mom go, because the mom was undocumented. What if we let her go? Well, let's put an ankle bracelet on her. You're worried about her, you know, leaving and not, you know, getting lost, and get her notice to appear. And he said, well, I could agree with that. Right? So it's having conversation, it's starting off where you maybe have some common ground, you know, being friendly. As a lawyer, I learned that you get way more when you get along with opposing counsel than when you are constantly fighting with them.
All right, I think our time is up. So please, a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.